So I remember someone coming up to me in the playground at school, and she must have seen that I was upset. I think I did cry quite a lot. And she said, have you come across the three principles? That was probably my starting place. That was where, the first time I wasn't being told to get some sort of anxiety treatment, some sort of fix for the anxiety. Here was someone who was kind of saying, yeah, have you ever become aware of the nature of thought? Do you know what you're doing with your mind? Do you know when you're time traveling into the future? Do you know when you're connecting with unstable thoughts? Do you know that you feel every thought you bring alive? No. I had no awareness, zero. I didn't know what I was doing with my mind. I didn't know how I was using it. It's like Sadhguru talks about this incredible tool. He talks about you might have a sharp knife and you want it to be sharp, because you're going to be using it to cut onions, or it needs to be sharp. And in the same way, we have this mind where we have the most vivid imagination. We have, you know, memories. We can go into the past and we can bring alive memories. We can go into the future and create a whole scenario of what's going to happen. We can punish ourselves by looking at memories that we don't like in the past. We can identify with them. We can define ourselves. We can use this gift in any which way. And so it's not about, trying to, if you imagine the knife and you keep stabbing yourself with the knife and you're like, ow, this knife is too sharp. No, you want the knife to be sharp. It's for cutting onions. But you want to know how you're using it. You don't want to keep stabbing yourself with it. And in the same way, you want your mind to be sharp. You want to have this gift of thought. You want to have the memories. You want to have this vivid imagination. But you want to know how you're using it. And I had no awareness. And so I could never guide my daughter. And if you think about it, the mind, it's a bit like a computer. Your brain, it's a bit like a computer. We get obsessed with our brain, but actually, when you start to become aware of who's using the brain, who's programming, who's putting the information in, who's firing up, who's using it, and that's when you can find this space when you leave it alone. If you think of a laptop and it's overheating and you keep plugging more and more information in, it's like when we start to feel overwhelmed, when we start thinking more and more, we start plugging more and more information in. And we have no awareness that actually there is this space. We can just close the laptop. I remember my daughter, especially at night, she would start to plug in a lot of insecure thoughts. She would start to overheat. Her mind would, start to just go crazy, and she would start to take herself into overwhelm. And there was kind of no willingness to kind of close the laptop. She just kept on, thinking more and more, trying to make herself feel better. And until I remember one night when she said to me, she said, Mum, will you read to me? And it was like she didn't know that, how to close the laptop of her mind. She didn't know how to stop, how to see beyond her thoughts, see beyond what she was creating. But she kind of knew that I did. And she kind of knew that if I was reading to her, she would be brought out of her mind. She would kind of be forced to put the thoughts down just for a moment. And so it was like she would have, what seemed like tiny insights, tiny shifts, but actually they were huge, because she would go from not being willing to engage at all and, just shouting and believing everything that came through her head. And then that day when she said, "Mum, will you read to me?" what she was saying was, I know that there is a space beyond my mind. I don't know how to find it, but you do. And it wasn't me saying, I need to read to you so that you can stop your mind from overthinking. And no, she was finding that for herself, because she was getting interested, because I stopped trying to fix her. And I started to get interested in what I was doing with my own mind. I started to see when I was drifting into the future. I started to see when she was drifting into the future. I didn't tell her not to do it. There was never, it wasn't like you have to change. It was, this is what you are doing. You're in the future. Come back. And the calmer I became, the more she got interested. Will you read to me, Mum? So I can put my thoughts down, because I don't know how to do that yet. But you do know. And it was the first time where it was almost like, having had years of the fixing and the counselling and the trying to change her thinking with more thinking and marking your anxiety from 1 to 10 and all of this stuff that we innocently went through before we arrived. It was like finally we could breathe, and she was there sort of saying, yeah, now you're looking in the right direction, Mum. Now I'll listen to you. Because before, you were not making any sense. None of you were making any sense. And I have such gratitude for that. The fact that she knew. Ultimately, she knew that we were all barking up the wrong tree. I'll come back.